Brief, I think John already answered Dolores's question about the so-called police action, as they called it at the time in Korea. That's what they called it. They sent, hundreds of thousands of troops in what they called a police action, as though the Koreans were just a bunch of crooks or bandits or something like that. That was the official name. On her remark about the emotions of the Korean people crying openly, this is very characteristic of the Korean people. They do not repress their emotions at all. Everything is on their sleeves and up front. And about 10 years ago, after I think 40 years in prison in South Korea, a group of North Koreans were released, some of them journalists who had been captured during the Korean War. They were the longest held political prisoners in the world at that time. And they were released, and they were allowed to go across the DMZ, and they went by motorcade from the border to Pyongyang, and the highway, the whole way, was filled with hundreds of thousands of Korean people welcoming them back and just crying and crying that they finally had been freed. I mean, some of them couldn't even straighten up. They had been in like little cells for so long, A wonderful group of men who would never go, they would never go over to the other side. They would have been released if they had. On reunification, which I think it was Alex raised, the DPRK tried very hard to have talks with the South. And at one point, after the military dictatorships fell because of huge rebellions in South Korea, there was a couple of liberal governments, and they actually had talks going on trying to eliminate some of the barriers to travel and stuff like that. The U.S. sabotaged all that. They sabotaged it and made it impossible for those talks. And now there's a right-wing government in South Korea which is just pursuing a very militaristic policy towards the North, completely in tandem with the U.S. and their joint military ventures with Japan, the former colonial power, the U.S. and South Korea having exercises right in the disputed waters off of North Korea. That was what happened, as you remember, last year. Finally, I just want to say about the attitude in the South. I was in Gwangju in 2004, which is in South Korea. It's where there had been a massacre 20 years earlier where 1,000 students were killed by the military in Gwangju, in South Korea. And I attended a rally in downtown Gwangju. This was in the liberal period, and I spoke along with a very wonderful Korean comrade, Yomi Jung, and then we went to we went and visited the grave sites of many of these young people who had been killed. But first, we were at this rally, 20,000 people, right in downtown Gwangju, and we were asked to speak, and we were on the program right after a rock band. So I don't know Korean, I didn't know what they were singing, but I could get the refrain because the refrain was in English. So they would go, fuck the USA! Fuck the USA! And the whole crowd, older people, sedate people, young people, everybody was there, yeah! So just to show you how a lot of people in South Korea feel about the US being there. And finally, let me say, what is it about North Korea that so much needs to be defended? I can just tell you from my own personal observation, the wealth in North Korea is in the public sector. That's where the wealth is. You go around Pyongyang, which of course is the capital and it's the most developed city, but I think this is true everywhere, maybe not to the same degree. The wealth is in the public library, which is fabulous, the schools, the stadiums, the hospitals. I mean, this is where the wealth is concentrated, is in all the things where we see that are now being dragged down here. And the only thing that has kept them from producing, this all over the country is this need to allocate tremendous resources to defense, and also to make up for the fact that they're embargoed, sanctioned, and have enormous difficulties in carrying out trade and earning the foreign currency that you have to have in order to import the things that you can't manufacture yourself. But that's what needs to be defended. Just what did the U.S. do in Iraq? They destroyed all the public stuff, didn't they? Didn't they destroy the museums and can you imagine what they would do to the DPRK if they could get their hands on it?